Our anniversary dinner. I need to tell you something, he said. What he revealed left me shattered. Story 1. Our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a celebration of love, commitment, and all the years Bryce and I had spent together. But instead, it was the night that tore my life apart. Let me back up a bit. My name's Moira, and I'm 48. Bryce and I met in our early 20s. He was charming, ambitious, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. We got married 3 years after we met and settled in a quiet suburb near Milwaukee. Over the years, we built what I thought was a solid life together. We raised 2 kids, now grown and out of the house. We had traditions, shared inside jokes, and a cozy home filled with memories. So, when Bryce suggested going out to a fancy restaurant to celebrate our anniversary, I thought it was his way of showing me that he hadn't forgotten about the spark we once had. The place he picked, Bacchus, wasn't just any restaurant. It was one of those high-end spots you reserve months in advance. I was excited. I thought, maybe this is a new chapter for us. Looking back, I feel like such an idiot for not seeing what was coming. From the moment we got into the car, Bryce was off. He wasn't his usual talkative self. Normally, he'd tease me about taking too long to get ready or comment on how good I looked. But that night, he was quiet, almost like he was forcing himself to stay calm. I even asked him if he was feeling okay, and he just shrugged it off, saying he was tired. I didn't press. I figured work had been stressful, and maybe he just needed this dinner to unwind. We arrived at Bacchus, and everything felt normal. The restaurant was beautiful, the kind of place where you feel like you have to sit up straighter and pretend you're fancier than you really are. The waiter poured us champagne to start, and I couldn't help but feel a bit giddy. I mean, how often do you get to celebrate 20 years of marriage? I toasted to us, to all the things we'd been through together, and he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Again, I brushed it off. We ordered, ate, laughed a little about old memories, and for a moment, I thought everything was fine. Better than fine, even. It felt like we were reconnecting. But then, as dessert arrived, everything shifted. Bryce put down his fork and leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. Moira, he said, his voice low, almost trembling. I need to tell you something. Instantly, my stomach dropped. There was something in his tone, serious, heavy, like whatever he was about to say would change everything. What is it? I asked. My heart was already racing. He hesitated, glancing around the room like he was worried someone might overhear. Finally, he said, I've been seeing someone else. At first, I didn't react. I just stared at him, trying to make sense of the words. What? I finally managed to whisper, though it came out shaky. I'm sorry, he said, looking down at his hands. I didn't want you to find out like this. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How long? I asked. My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. He looked up at me, guilt written all over his face. Almost a year. I don't even know how to describe what I felt in that moment. Anger. Betrayal. Numbness. It all hit me at once. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. I wanted to scream at him, to throw my drink in his face, to make a scene right there in the restaurant. But all I could do was sit there, staring at him like I didn't even know who he was anymore. Who is she? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated again, which only made my blood boil. Her name is Delilah, he finally said. She works with me at the office. Of course, she did. Because that's how these things always go, right? The late nights at work, the extra meetings, the business trips, it all started to make sense. I wanted to know everything, even though I knew the answers would only hurt me more. How old is she? I demanded. He looked away, ashamed. 27. I couldn't stop myself from laughing again, though this time it was bitter and full of rage. 27? Are you kidding me, Bryce? She's young enough to be your daughter. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, looking pathetic and guilty, which only made me angrier. The waiter came by to check on us, and I had to force myself to smile and say everything was fine. The last thing I wanted was for some stranger to witness my humiliation. The rest of the night is a blur. I don't remember if I said anything else or if I just sat there in silence. Bryce paid the bill, and we left. The car ride home was completely silent. I was too angry to speak, and he was too cowardly to try. The moment we walked into the house, I lost it. I slammed the door shut and turned on him. How could you? I screamed. After everything I've done for you, after everything we've been through, how could you do this to me? He tried to apologize, but I wasn't having it. I didn't care about his excuses or his regrets. You don't just accidentally cheat on someone for a year, Bryce, I shouted. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose her instead of me. When he realized there was nothing he could say to calm me down, he tried a different tactic. I didn't want you to find out this way, he said, as if that made it better. "Oh, I'm sorry," I snapped. "Would you have preferred I found out when you brought her to Thanksgiving dinner? Or maybe when she started wearing my clothes?" I kicked him out that night. I told him to pack a bag and go stay with Delilah or wherever the hell he wanted, as long as it wasn't here. Watching him pack a bag and walk out the door was one of the most surreal moments of my life. This was the man I had loved, trusted, built a life with. And now he was just gone. But it didn't end there. Because, of course, Bryce wasn't just unfaithful, he was reckless. And what I found out next made everything even worse. The night Bryce left felt like the end of my world. I cried until my chest ached and my throat burned. I stayed up until dawn, replaying every memory of our life together, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at Bryce, but at myself. I had spent 20 years putting him first, supporting his career, raising our kids, and keeping our home together, only for him to betray me with some 27-year-old intern named Delilah. I decided I wasn't going to sit around and let him ruin my life. If he wanted a war, he'd get one. A week later, I got a call from Bryce's brother, Grant. We had always been close, and when he heard about the affair, he was furious. He said he needed to tell me something, and from the tone of his voice, I could tell it wasn't good. "Moira," Grant said, "you're not going to believe this. Bryce didn't just cheat on you. He's been using your house as collateral for a second mortgage." "What are you talking about?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist. "I found out from our parents," he explained. "Bryce borrowed against your house to buy Delilah a condo downtown. The mortgage company sent a notice to Mom and Dad's address by mistake. He's put you in serious financial trouble." I couldn't breathe. Not only had Bryce been lying to me about the affair, but he had jeopardized my home, our home, to fund his fantasy life with Delilah. That was it. I wasn't just going to divorce him. I was going to destroy him. I hired the best divorce lawyer I could find. She was a no-nonsense woman named Vivian, and from the moment we met, I knew she was exactly what I needed. She went through our finances with a fine-tooth comb and uncovered more than I ever expected. Bryce had been hiding assets for years, offshore accounts, fake business expenses, and even a secret retirement fund. He thought he was being clever, but Vivian was smarter. We filed for divorce immediately and froze every joint account. I sold his beloved classic car, a bright red 1967 Mustang he cherished more than anything, using my power as a co-owner on the title. The money went straight into a separate account in my name. It wasn't enough to cover the mortgage mess he created, but it was a start. But I wasn't done yet. I started digging into Delilah's life. Through some mutual acquaintances and a little social media sleuthing, I found out that her shiny new condo wasn't the only thing Bryce was paying for. He'd also been footing the bill for her yoga classes, expensive vacations, and a designer handbag collection that would make anyone jealous. All of it was on our dime. So, I did what any scorned wife with time and a burning desire for revenge would do. I made sure everyone knew the truth. I sent anonymous tips to the firm where Bryce worked, outlining his misuse of company funds, because, oh yes, he had dipped into those accounts too. I attached all the evidence I'd gathered, thanks to Vivian's help. The firm didn't take long to act. Bryce was fired within a week. His reputation as a respectable architect was completely destroyed. Word spread fast in our community, and soon, even his closest friends were turning their backs on him. People whispered about how he'd betrayed me, mortgaged our home, and lost everything for a fling with a girl half his age. But it got worse for him. When the divorce was finalized, I got the house, most of our savings, what was left of it, and even a portion of his future earnings as part of the settlement. Bryce was left with almost nothing, and good luck paying for Delilah's lifestyle now. The cherry on top? I reached out to Delilah. I sent her a polite but detailed email explaining how Bryce had lied to her too. I told her about the other women he had cheated on me with before her. I even attached proof. She replied a few days later, thanking me for the enlightening information and saying she was done with Bryce. Turns out, Delilah wasn't as naive as I thought. She packed up and left him, taking her designer handbags and moving back in with her parents. Bryce was completely alone, no job, no girlfriend, and no support system. He called me once, begging me to talk to him, but I didn't answer. I had nothing left to say to him. Now, 6 months later, my life is finally back on track. I sold the house and moved into a smaller, cozier place closer to downtown. I've reconnected with old friends, started a new job, and even joined a book club. For the first time in years, I feel free. As for Bryce? Last I heard, he's renting a dingy apartment and working a low-level job at some random construction firm. I can't say I feel sorry for him. He made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. Revenge might not fix everything, but let me tell you, it feels damn good knowing I stood up for myself. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you don't mess with a woman who's got nothing left to lose. Story 2. Let me tell you about the absolute mess my sister-in-law, Tallulah, made of my life. Because, honestly, I still can't believe the audacity she had. This isn't one of those little misunderstandings or family quirks. No, this is betrayal on a level that still makes my blood boil. I'm not a dramatic person by nature, but when someone messes with you this bad, there's no other way to tell the story. My name's Mordecai. I know, old school name, but I guess my mom wanted something unique. I'm 39 years old, married to my amazing wife Greta, and I live in Fairhope, Alabama, a picturesque little town on the Gulf Coast. Life's been good overall. I'm a pharmacist, so I worked my ass off to get where I am today. Years of school, grinding through tough days at work, and being smart with my money. Greta and I don't have kids yet, but we've built a comfortable life together. I guess that's why what happened felt like such a gut punch. It wasn't just about money, it was personal. See, I've always had this thing about milestones. I like to commemorate them with something meaningful. For me, it's usually jewelry. I don't mean flashy, over-the-top stuff, I'm talking about classic, timeless pieces that feel like an investment. When I finally paid off my student loans, I decided to celebrate with something special, a custom $10,000 diamond ring. This wasn't just a ring. It was a symbol of years of hard work and discipline. Every time I looked at it, I felt proud. It was my way of reminding myself of how far I'd come. Now, let's talk about Tallulah. She's my sister-in-law, Greta's younger sister. To put it bluntly, she's a walking disaster. Tallulah is the kind of person who's always got some drama going on. She can't hold down a job, she spends money like it grows on trees, and she's been in debt for as long as I've known her. Every few months, there's some new crisis, a car repair she can't afford, rent she's behind on, or some scheme that's fallen apart. And who does she call when she's desperate? Us. Greta has always been way too forgiving when it comes to her sister. She's family, Greta would say whenever I got frustrated. She just needs a little help. A little help would have been fine. But over the years, we've loaned Tallulah thousands of dollars, money we knew we'd never see again. Greta always believed in giving her the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to believe in her too, but Tallulah just kept taking advantage of us. Still, I never expected her to stoop as low as she did. It all started a few months ago when Tallulah showed up at our house unannounced. She looked frazzled, more than usual, and I knew something was up. She had this way of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't, but that day, she didn't even try to hide it. "Mordecai, Greta," she said, dropping her purse on our kitchen counter. "I really need your help." I sighed. Greta shot me a look, the kind of look that says, "Be nice." "What's going on, Tallulah?" Greta asked. Tallulah launched into this long-winded story about how she'd fallen behind on her credit card payments. She'd maxed out 3 cards, apparently trying to start her own business. That was news to us. According to her, she'd been selling handmade jewelry online, but the whole thing flopped because the market's too competitive. Now the creditors were hounding her, threatening to take her to court if she didn't pay up. "I'm drowning," she said, tearing up. "I just need $8,000 to get them off my back." Greta looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Mordecai, maybe we can figure something out?" I shook my head. "We've already bailed her out so many times, Greta. This has to stop." Tallulah jumped in before Greta could respond. "I swear this is the last time. I'll pay you back, I promise." "Like you promised last time?" I shot back. I knew it was harsh, but enough was enough. Greta ended up convincing me to at least think about it. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't want to fight with my wife over her sister. I told Tallulah we'd discuss it and let her know. She left that day looking hopeful, but I had no intention of giving her another dime. Greta and I argued about it later, but I stood my ground. Then, 2 weeks later, the unthinkable happened. I came home from work one evening and noticed something was off. My jewelry box, where I kept the ring, was open. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I rushed over and checked. The ring was gone. At first, I thought maybe Greta had moved it for some reason. I called her, trying to stay calm. "Hey, did you take my ring out of the box?" I asked. There was a pause. "What? No, why would I do that?" Panic set in. Someone had taken it. My mind raced as I tried to figure out who could have done it. We hadn't had any guests over recently, except for Tallulah. "Do you think Tallulah?" I started, but Greta cut me off. "No. Mordecai, don't jump to conclusions." But I couldn't shake the feeling. Tallulah had been desperate for money, and she knew how much that ring meant to me. I didn't want to believe she'd do something so low, but who else could it have been? I decided to confront her. Greta begged me to wait until we had proof, but I couldn't. I called Tallulah that night. "Hey, Tallulah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Quick question, did you happen to see my ring when you were over here last time?" She hesitated. "What ring?" "You know exactly what ring I'm talking about," I said, my patience wearing thin. She stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I could hear the guilt in her voice. Finally, she broke down and admitted it. "I'm sorry, Mordecai," she said, crying. I didn't know what else to do. I was going to tell you, I swear. I just needed the money so badly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She'd stolen my $10,000 ring and sold it. What the hell, Tallulah? I shouted. Do you have any idea what that ring meant to me? How could you do this? She tried to justify it, saying she had no other options, that she was desperate, that I didn't really need it anyway. That's when I lost it. You've got 24 hours to fix this, I told her. I don't care how you do it, but I want my ring back. She begged for more time, but I hung up. Greta was in tears by the time I got off the phone. She couldn't believe her sister had done something so awful. Tallulah promised to make it right, but I didn't believe a word of it. The next day, I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. Greta even tried, and still, no answer. That's when I knew she wasn't planning to fix this. She was probably hoping I'd just cool down and let it go, like we always did. But this time, I wasn't letting it go. I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I called every pawn shop and jewelry store in Fairhope and the surrounding towns. It wasn't easy, but after about a dozen calls, I finally found it. The guy on the phone described the ring perfectly, down to the custom engraving I had on the inside. My heart was pounding as I asked if it was still there. Yeah, we've got it, the shop owner said. It's priced at $3,500. I could have screamed. Tallulah had sold my $10,000 ring for pennies on the dollar. I told the owner I'd be there within the hour to buy it back. It hurt like hell to shell out $3,500 for something that was already mine, but I didn't see any other choice. At least I had my ring back. But I wasn't done. Now, it was time for payback. The first thing I did was call the police. I filed a report for theft and provided all the proof, the receipt from the pawn shop, texts from Tallulah admitting she'd taken the ring, and even a photo of the ring that matched the one the pawn shop had. The officer I spoke to was sympathetic. He said they'd open an investigation and get back to me. Next, I talked to Greta. She was torn, angry at Tallulah but also heartbroken that her sister had done this. I told her straight up, I'm not letting this slide. She needs to face the consequences. Greta didn't argue. For once, she understood that this wasn't just about the ring. It was about respect, boundaries, and the fact that Tallulah had burned us one too many times. A few days later, the police contacted me. They'd spoken to Tallulah, and she confessed everything. She tried to play the victim, saying she was desperate and didn't mean to hurt anyone, but it didn't matter. Theft is theft. The officer told me they were moving forward with charges. I knew Tallulah was going to hate me for it, but honestly, I didn't care. She'd brought this on herself. But I wasn't done yet. Tallulah's big thing was her social media. She always acted like she had this perfect, glamorous life, posting photos of herself in fancy outfits or bragging about her business ventures. I decided it was time to pull back the curtain. I made a post on Facebook, not to be petty, but to set the record straight. I kept it factual, but I didn't hold back. I wrote. Many of you know my sister-in-law, Tallulah. What you don't know is that she recently stole a $10,000 ring from me and sold it to a pawn shop for $3,500. I've gotten the ring back, but I've also filed a police report, and charges are being pressed. I've stayed quiet about a lot of things over the years, but this time, I can't. Family or not, stealing is unacceptable. I hope this serves as a wake-up call for her. The post blew up. People were shocked. Some defended Tallulah, saying she must have been desperate, but most were on my side. A few even messaged me privately to share their own stories about how Tallulah had borrowed money from them and never paid it back. Turns out, she'd been burning bridges left and right. Tallulah, of course, was furious. She called Greta, screaming about how I'd ruined her life. Greta told her, "You did this to yourself. Don't call me again." That was the end of that. In the weeks that followed, Tallulah's world fell apart. She lost her apartment because she couldn't pay rent. Her so-called friends stopped hanging out with her, probably because they didn't want to get dragged into her mess. And, eventually, she had to go to court for the theft charges. She pleaded guilty, and while she didn't go to jail, she was slapped with a hefty fine and court-ordered community service. It was a harsh lesson, but one she desperately needed. As for me and Greta, we moved on. It wasn't easy, but I think this whole ordeal brought us closer together. Greta finally saw Tallulah for who she really was, and she stopped making excuses for her. We agreed that, from now on, our focus would be on building a life together, not cleaning up other people's messes. And my ring? It's back where it belongs, locked up in a safe this time. Every time I look at it now, it reminds me of two things: how hard I've worked for what I have, and how important it is to stand up for yourself, even when it's messy, even when it's family. In the end, I think I did Tallulah a favor. She needed to hit rock bottom to finally take responsibility for her life. Whether she learns from it or not, that's on her. But me? I'm done being her safety net. And that, my friends, is how you handle betrayal.